Okay, members of council, if you can please take your seats. Members of council, this meeting is now resumed. Members, please rise for a moment of silence, and during this time, please remember Thomas G. McMillan. Thank you. Members, we have two presentations this morning. The first is to recognize Joe Farag, Executive Director of Corporate Finance, on his retirement from the city. I would like to call upon Chris Murray, City Manager, to come forward for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And thank you all for joining us today to commemorate the career of Joe Farag, Executive Director of Corporate Finance. I just want to point out that both Ali and Connor, Joe's children, are in the audience. If you don't mind standing up and waving, a proud moment for your dad. As all of you know, public service is an incredibly special thing, and so to have an opportunity to commemorate a fantastic career is such an honor for me. Joe has dedicated the last 29 years to Toronto Public Service, and it goes without saying that his accomplishments and contributions to the city over those years have been numerous. I'm happy to have the opportunity to publicly recognize your contributions, Joe, on behalf of the senior leadership team and colleagues. Joe has been front and center in the introduction of policies that have helped make Toronto a better place to live and a more competitive place to do business. This includes leading the development of rates for water usage, 9% over 9 years, Joe? I say no more. The creation of Toronto's Investment Board, the creation of Canada's largest municipal green bond program, to name just a few. On revenue tools, he oversaw the policy development on the municipal land transfer tax and implementation of our municipal accommodation tax. Joe is also part of the negotiating team for the development of BMO Field, the Raptors training field facility, so I guess we can attribute the win, the World Championship, to you, which is always a good thing. Coca-Cola Coliseum and waterfront redevelopment. On the transit file, Joe has been and continues to be a valued contributor and advisor. He was instrumental in the acquisition of Union Station, and his input helped secure approval of the Shepherd Subway and the Toronto-York-Spadina Subway extension. And most recently, Joe has provided valuable insight on the transit report with the province, which we approved yesterday. Joe, you will leave a legacy you should be proud of, and your children should be proud of, one that has always put Toronto and its residents first. We thank you sincerely for a job well done, and offer our best wishes to you as you enter the next chapter of your life. Thank you very much. I would now like to invite Mayor Tory to present a memento of appreciation for Joe's contributions to the Toronto Public Service.
Well, Chris, thank you. And Joe, I've only been here for 5 years, but you have served for 29, and I've certainly had a chance, though, to see in those 5 years a number of things. Some of the projects, I won't repeat them all that Chris mentioned, that some of which took place before I was here and some not. And I did learn, because I was taught by all my council colleagues, that when people would mention to us the water rates going up 9%, that we said to call you. But if you think about what a responsible thing that was to do and how much it's put us in a good position today in terms of the water infrastructure and in terms of the principle of having that particular, obviously vital service pay for itself and be well financed on a sustainable basis going forward. It was a very important initiative, and I should say you were involved, and I think Chris mentioned this, I'm not sure, in the development of the first development charge bylaw as well. And I can tell you, having been through a couple of the sort of the settings of the development charges, that you were there a force to be reckoned with. And isn't that the way public service is supposed to work, that we're getting our professional advisors to give us in a way that is sort of unflinching and yet, you know, respectful and professional their best advice, and to sometimes push back against our inclination to do things differently. And certainly, in that instance, the most recent development charge negotiation, in the context of the budget that I guess you helped to see us through when we were between chief financial officers, and on the transit talks, as I understand, you have played that role always the same way, professional. You were rooted in your convictions as to what the right thing to do was and gave us advice accordingly. And I want to make particular mention of the green bonds. I was very proud in Copenhagen, and Councillor Layton and Councillor McKelvey and Councillor Thompson, Deputy Mayor Thompson, were also there. But, we actually are doing much better in that regard as a municipality than almost anywhere else in the world. And that, again, has been, I know you'd be the first to say it's a team, but that, again, has been as a testament to your leadership that we have moved into the green bonds and green financing in a way that I think makes the city proud. And I just concur in what Chris said about the fact that you certainly, as a result of having helped make the Raptors practice facility a reality, can claim a degree of credit more so than the rest of us for the fact that we won the World Championship. So I wish you well in your retirement. I always find it, the other day I was at a meeting, and I think the way I asked about it, I said, is that actually happening? Because they were talking about the council meeting, and you hear about these retirements, you look at people who seem very young and totally sort of with it in terms of their professional capacities, getting better by the day, and you sort of say, why are they retiring? But it is great that you've made this decision to take the next chapter in your life. I'm sure your family's going to be excited to have more of your time. And I want to just say thank you for a job extremely well done, extremely professionally done, done with conviction. And we don't. This is what it is, which is very meaningful on the one hand in that it comes from the council, but we don't have a new car, but I hope that you understand that this comes with our great affection and esteem and gratitude for a job very well done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You and I have to take a photo.
Yes. I have to tell you, it feels great standing up here, not having to worry about questions, especially from Councillor Perks. So, Mr. Mayor and Chris, thank you so much for your kind words and the acknowledgement. They truly mean a great deal to me. So, Madam Speaker, it goes without saying that none of my career accomplishments would have been possible without the talents and dedication and support of so many colleagues. And with your indulgence, I would just like to take a minute to recognize them. They're my management team from corporate finance. They include Jeff Madeley. Jeff is our Director of Risk Management and Insurance, and his group oversees some 6,000 claims, believe it or not, annually against the city. They do that with a great deal of professionalism and tact in resolving them. Randy Leclerc and Betsy Yang, they lead our capital markets section. Together with the Toronto Investment Board, they invest some $7 billion of city assets in the capital markets. Chris Toomey and Boriana Varleva of our financial policy group, they also look after our property tax system or property tax policies. These account for the largest share of revenue that we generate annually at about $4.3 billion. And my right hand, Rob Hatton, who's our Director of Strategic Initiatives and Intergovernmental Policy. Rob's group sort of deals with what we public finance dorks call very, very sexy projects, including quota revenue tools, MLTT revenues, development charges, and the like. I'm truly thankful for all of your contributions and your support to me over the years. I would also like to thank three key colleagues that I have the greatest of respect for. Our city solicitor, Wendy Wahlberg. for her thoughtful and sage advice over the years that have kept me out of trouble. Josie Levita, we didn't often agree on many things, but I can tell you that nobody could question her passion for public service and her municipal finance expertise. And certainly last but not least, Juliana Carboni. Juliana has been a colleague of mine for some 25 years. She truly embodies all of the great attributes of a Toronto public servant. So I feel incredibly fortunate to have been part of this organization for nearly 3 decades, to see us go from 7 separate entities into one unified city in 1998, to see us mature over the past 2 decades from a lower 2-tier municipality to a mature order of government that is larger than many provincial governments. We've gone from a period of having to go hat in hand to Queen's Park for help to close budget gaps to a period of 10 consecutive healthy budget surpluses. We have a robust and truly resilient economy, a credit rating that's just a notch below AAA. We have by far the greatest number of high-rise cranes that dot our city, more than any other municipality or city in North America. And by any measure, we rank as one of the most livable cities in the world. I think with greater investment in public transit and affordable housing by the other orders of government, the likes of what we saw yesterday, and perhaps a future that sees us access some more progressive taxes, I think we'll be well on our way to fiscal sustainability and perhaps a greater social equity. Mr. Mayor, it's been an absolute privilege to serve as a member of the Toronto Public Service, and a pleasure to work with you in your office for the past 5 years. This place is like, a second home to me, and I will always look upon it and you members of council with great fondness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our second presentation is to recognize the Toronto Wolfpack Ruby team for winning the Betfred Championship. I would like to call upon Mayor Tory to come forward for the presentation.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm so sorry that, there's the mascot. I'm so sorry that Councillor Robinson, for many reasons, that Councillor Robinson isn't able to be with us today. And I mention that because she convinced me, and it took some convincing, to go to a news conference about probably 4 years ago. And it was a news conference to announce a notion that seemed to be sort of far-fetched in a way, which was that Toronto was going to have a... Good morning. It's got to be... This happened... Yeah, there's a lot of characters like you around here. The notion that was fairly far-fetched was that Toronto was going to have a professional rugby team, but it was going to play a lot of its game, pretty well all of its games except for its home games, and even some of its home games overseas. And that when it played its home games, the teams were going to come from overseas to play here. And it just was one of those things where you sort of thought to yourself, how are they going to make that work, and are they going to make it work? But I went because Jay convinced me to go, quite frankly, because she was friendly with some of the people who were the sponsors. And the bottom line is, not only have they made it work, they've made it work in 2 ways that I wouldn't have thought possible. The one that you thought of as a real possibility, but not a sure thing by any means, was just that there would be the fan support. And what's happened is, because I've had a chance to go to the games, I know Councillor Grimes, I was about to call him Senator Grimes. That'd be quite fitting, don't you think? We'd be a Senator Grimes. I know Councillor Grimes, is a very loyal supporter, but it is more fun, I can tell you, for those who haven't had a chance to go, because very much like TFC, because I think it's new and because I think it appeals to sort of a grassroots group of sports fans, it's tremendously well supported, and the games are great fun. And last game, the one that they won to move them up into the Super League just a couple of weeks ago, the place was full, at Lamport Stadium, 9,950 people or something. There wasn't a seat to be had. And so that's something that I thought wasn't likely all that possible. But the other thing that you thought wasn't necessarily possible for a team based here and playing in the circumstances it was playing back and forth overseas and so on was that they would be able to be a winner. You know, with most teams like this, it takes years before they're able to be contenders. And this team was almost a contender from day one and has done particularly well the last 2 years. And so I just think that in that regard it is worthy of recognition that they did defeat on that day a couple of weeks ago the Featherstone Rovers 24-6 in the Betfred Championship Grand Final, and this earns them a spot in the Premier Rugby League in the Northern Hemisphere. And when I had the chance to be overseas in London recently, I can tell you that people were aware of that over there. It's on the BBC, on the sports, and that's again good for the Toronto name because it has our name out there in a different context talking about rugby. And so I just want to say that we're very proud of you, the team. And I want to just mention a couple of key people that have been really responsible for this. I didn't know him, although I met him, and I had a chance to be with Councillor Grimes down on the field after the game, and when you come up against these guys who play, of course, with no pads at all, and they play a very rough game, and they're big guys, but the guy that also just fit sort of from Central Casting is their coach, Brian McDermott, and all the staff that he has, but he's from Central Casting, and I gather he's one of the most highly regarded coaches in the game of rugby, which is a great and exciting game. I want to, of course, extend our congratulations to the players. Our friend Mr. Hunter here was brought in to be the CEO of the company, and of course he's well known to us in the sporting world in Toronto. He's had a role to play in many of the exciting chapters in Canadian sports and in Toronto sports, and I think he took over in somewhat challenging circumstances to make sure that every part of this team could rally around the players and could make sure the fans had the opportunity to cheer on this team. We have a little bit of work to do perhaps with them in making sure that stadium is all that it needs to be so that it can be a home for the community, a better home for the community as well as for the Wolfpack in the coming years, but that's a discussion for another day. And so may I just say to you, congratulations on the win. And Bob, please extend our congratulations to all the players, to the coaching staff, to the management team, and just say to them we're proud of you as we're proud of our sports teams that have had such a good run recently, another championship team for Toronto. In fact, I've called Mayor Iveson in Edmonton to see if we can borrow those signs that they have that says City of Champions and just stick that on all those signs that are at Steeles Avenue and various other places coming into the City of Toronto. Thank you for joining the ranks of the champions, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for allowing us this moment. I personally actually would like to pass on my congratulations to Joe Farag. I can give you full assurance that in the 4 leases I negotiated with him during my time at MLSE, Joe represented the city very well. He was a very tough negotiator. We did BMO Field twice. We did the Raptors practice facility, BioSteel, now OVO. And we did the Ricoh Coliseum, now Coca-Cola Coliseum. But Joe and the team and Diane Young and the legal team were very, very tough negotiators. But we got a deal done because it was good for business. So again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and especially thank you for dragging your dolly and yourself out to the last game. He was brave enough to walk across the field in his boot. He didn't take the stroller, as whatever it's called, and we do appreciate you being there. It says a lot to our fans, and it says a lot to the city. It says a lot to our players. So a few other people I want to thank, but just to give everyone an idea, 3 years ago we launched this undertaking. We brought an exciting new sport to the city. I have a picture in my office that shows the opening game, and you could shoot an arrow in there and not hit anybody. As the last game, we were over 10,000 people. Jeannie, I know it only holds 9, but we were able to squeeze a few in. So anyways, but David Argyle has been the supporter of this financially and emotionally, and he is really, really a keen Torontoite who has a passion for rugby. 3 years in a row, we've been promoted. It's just a wonderful undertaking. And to the mayor's comments, we're now at the epitome of the professional rugby in the UK. So a great opportunity to market this city and to market Toronto. And to give you an idea, now that at this level, the visiting teams on average will fly in 1,000 fans from the UK. So every 2 weeks, the hotels will enjoy the benefit, the restaurants will enjoy the benefit, and we'll enjoy having them here. So great opportunity. Anyways, now I'm cutting it short. So thank you to David Argyle. Thank you to the Minister of Sport, Mark Grimes, who has been a big supporter in all the deals that we had to do with Joe Farag. But, and thank you to the city. As our landlord, we work with Janie and her team at Park Recs and Forestry, and it's been a very, very cooperative and amicable relationship. So we're looking forward to going forward with you on a long-term arrangement. We really believe that the uniqueness of Landport being downtown in the hub of Liberty Village is a very great opportunity for us. Great opportunity. Last but not least, I would like to thank our staff who are all here. I'd like them just to stand quickly in the back. They're an amazing, hardworking, passionate group, and we look forward for them to grow as we grow in the league. Last but not least, you're all invited to the April 18th home opener. Because of the season, we actually play 3 of our home games in the UK before we can actually get back here into warm weather. So April 18th, we've got lots of work to do, and we look forward to working with you on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members of council, we will now review and confirm the order paper. There are 44 items left on the agenda, including 29 member motions. Yesterday, council decided to consider item EC 8.16 on provincial funding changes and previously approved child care capital projects update as this first item of business this morning. City Council will consider member motions at 2 p.m. I will now take the release of holds. Please put your name under request to question staff. Deputy Mayor Min Wong.
Yes, page 3, North York Community Council 8.3 and 8.4, final report 1299 Don Mills Road, and the second one is also with regard to the heritage issues at the same address. I'm happy to release those and reduce the numbers from 44 to 42.
You have to move the supplementary?
Oh, and I'll move this up no, it's an information report.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Do I have to move that for information, the supplementary? Okay, fair enough. I'll release those 2 items.
So you're just releasing it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So we'll vote on page 3, NY 8.3 first. All in favor? Carried. NY 8.4, all in favor? Carried. Councillor Cole.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to add an amendment and release a NY 9.13, a demolition application, 2296 Eglinton Avenue West.
What page?
Page 8.
Oh, 8. 4. You're on the wrong.
We're on a different day.
Okay,
Page 4,
You saw yesterday.
I tried to do it yesterday.
NY 9.13. Councillor Cole?
Yes.
Demolition application
Yes,
for,
I
okay.
have an amendment.
You have an amendment? Does the staff have your amendment?
Yes.
It's on the screen.
Okay, it's on the screen.
Want me to read it?
All in favor? Did somebody say wait? All in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Counselor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. On page 4, TE 9.37, construction staging area time extension 4 Avenue Road. I have an amendment, and that's to,
It's here without recommendation, so you have a motion, right?
I have an amendment to the staff recommendation, and that's, the amendment is to change July 31st, 2020 to January 31st, 2020. I'm doing this because I'm not convinced the developer, in fact, needs the additional time, because every time I ask, they give a different rationale. And so I don't think we should continue. It's actually a sidewalk occupation, but we want our sidewalk back at some point.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So on page 3EX 9.4, I held it down. I have an amendment, if we can put on the screen. Pardon? Oh, you, okay, so we'll hold it down then. All right, I'll continue holding it. Councillor Bailao?
Thank you,
Councillor Pasternak, have you submitted your amendment to staff? Okay, so maybe we can release it. Sorry, Councillor Bailao. Which page?
No problem. Page 4, PH 9.3, I do have an amendment, so I'll try to release this as a quick, you have it? Okay, so we'll have to stand this down.
Okay, so do we want to go back to EX 9.4? Councillor Pasternak, you have an amendment? Oh, all right, we'll continue holding it. Okay. All those in favor of adopting the order paper? On favor? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Holliday, point of order.
I'm going to stretch as a point of order, but I just want to point out to members that there's the first 3 audit items are potentially available to go on camera. So for an efficient meeting, if members have questions that need to go on camera, we should bundle them together. And maybe they can indicate them to you or to me so we can hold those appropriately.
Yeah, so if any members of council want to go in camera on the audit committee reports, please let the staff know so then we can go into camera. Okay, our first timed item is on page 4, EC 8.16. Councillor Cressy, you held the item down. Do we have questions? Okay. Councillor Cressy, questions?
Thank you, Speaker. To our fabulous team at Children's Services. Let me start with the cost of childcare in the City of Toronto. What is the average cost for licensed childcare for an infant in the City of Toronto?
Madam Speaker, the average cost for an infant childcare space is $22,000 a year.
$22,000 a year for an infant, and for a toddler?
$17,000 a year.
We don't happen to know offhand what the average cost of tuition in Canada is, because I suspect a year of childcare is more than 4 years of tuition.
I don't. I was
Yeah.
looking at Mike. I was thinking
Don't
he
worry.
might actually know that.
Don't worry, don't worry. So that's the average cost. Is childcare in Toronto the most expensive of any city in the country?
Yes, the evidence would indicate that childcare in the City of Toronto is one of the most expensive in the country.
Okay. The subsidy program we have, so the subsidy program is intended to support people on lower incomes so that they can afford childcare. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. How many people in the City of Toronto are utilizing the subsidy program?
Currently, we have about 30,700 families, subsidized spaces that are being utilized by families in the city.
30,700 spaces. Is that everybody, or is there a waiting list?
No, there's a waiting list of 17,000 families at the moment.
Okay. So we're dealing in front of us today is the latest round of the latest SAG and provincial cuts to childcare. So is the province still proposing to reduce the amount as a cost share that they provide for the subsidy program from 100 to 80%. Are they still doing that reduction?
Councillor Cressy, hold on, I have to put your time on hold. If I can ask members of council and staff to please try to keep it down, it's a little noisy in the council chambers. Please, it's hard to hear the questions and answers. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Madam Speaker, I can confirm that the expansion funding that is provided to the City of Toronto from the province was reduced this year by $15 million.
$15 million as a result of the cost share reduction?
That's correct, as a result of the change to the cost share requirement.
Okay. So that change results in a $15 million cut to this city. Is that cost share reduction continuing next year? Have we heard?
The province has indicated that the change in the cost share will continue next year. It won't be an additional $15 million, but they do not indicate they would be reinstating that $15 million.
Now, did you receive a letter late on Friday afternoon indicating that the province, while they're not changing the subsidy cut, they are in fact providing us an increase this year in core funding of $12 and change million?
That's correct. Although our expansion plan funding was reduced by $15 million, we received an increase in our core funding of $12.2 million. Both of those funding types can be used for fee subsidies.
Okay. So for this year then, based on that news we received on Friday, there is an outstanding cut for our subsidy program of how much?
$2.8 million.
$2.8 million. Has the province confirmed that in 2021 we will in fact receive that increase in core funding again? Have they confirmed that?
No, our allocations from the province are confirmed annually. We don't receive that in advance, so we will have to wait till our next year allocation.
So there is no guarantee that this time next year we won't be back in the same situation trying to make up that $15 million gap for subsidies, which impact 760 families.
That's correct.
Okay. And then on childcare expansion, because we've talked about the subsidy program, what percentage of kids, so this is just at whatever your income level is, what percentage of kids are in licensed childcare right now in our city?
Approximately 33% of families are using licensed childcare.
And what is our growth target for that to get to?
Our growth target would be to have 50% of families be able to access licensed childcare.
So we have 49 new childcare sites identified right across the city in every ward to help us meet those growth targets for new spaces regardless of income. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. In the province, the 17 sites we're building now, the province was paying 100% of the capital and operating. For these 49 additional sites, have they changed the model so that they are no longer providing the operating?
The original model did provide operating. The second announcement about capital, there was no commitment to provide the operating, although they would continue to provide capital for those programs.
So to meet our growth targets, to open these 49 additional sites, once they're all open, what will the annual financial impact be on this city with the provincial removal of the operating? How much will that be?
The annual impact, once all of those programs open, which is expected to be about 2024, would be $34 million.
Thank you, Councillor Cressy. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I know Councillor Cressy has asked a lot of the questions, which is terrific, that I was about to ask. But I wanted to understand, through you, Madam Speaker, the process that's ongoing right now in terms of discussion with the province. How are those going, and are you confident that we'll be able to address many of the issues and concerns that Councillor Cressy has just brought forward through this mechanism? Is there anything else that you need to assist you?
Madam Speaker, yes, I can confirm that the City of Toronto and Children's Services is working at a number of advisory tables, both with our intergovernmental partners, other municipal partners, and cross-sectorally. So through those mechanisms, we have the opportunity to collaborate with our partners, provide advice, and at a local level, really indicate what our needs are in terms of the best outcomes for children and family. And I'm confident that those conversations are going well.
Now, the province also provides other municipalities with funding as well to assist with respect to childcare. Is Toronto being treated any differently than sort of the other areas across the province?
Madam Speaker, I can confirm that the cost share changes were across the entire province, not just the City of Toronto.
Right. The 49 school-based childcare space that we spoke about, the beginning of the program at the start, how many spaces have we opened in the schools to date?
To date, from when that program was announced, one center is open, so approximately 69 spaces. Other centers are expected to open over the next couple of years.
Within the time frame of this agreement, will we find that all the centers that are to be open, will they be open within this time frame?
In the time frame of this particular provincial agreement, no, I would, given the rate of delivery historically, I don't expect that they will really be delivered till about 2024, and by then we would certainly have potentially a new agreement.
So what then is the real impact with respect to the reduction? Is there a real impact at this time since you've opened one over that span of time?
Madam Speaker, we don't expect to actually have a pressure or an impact until about 2024 because there is funding provided for the first 17 locations, which will take a number of years to deliver.
A line of questioning that Councillor Cressy asked, and you provided information about low-income individuals who are benefiting from the subsidies and so on. I met, and the mayor and I, we were at the Birkdale child care facilities. There were folks there who were professionals. There's one lady, I believe, either her or her husband was a lawyer. Is that considered low income in terms of the people who are benefiting? Because some of those individuals there indicated that they too were benefiting from the subsidies. So is it just simply people who are low income, or what's the threshold, what's the definition there?
Madam Speaker, the income test is a provincial legislated mandated test.
Right.
It would be unusual for families with a high income to qualify, but circumstances given the number of children, it's possible. Families, though, are benefiting from affordability measures that have been implemented through the growth strategy. So through base funding, we've been able to provide funding to operators to offset fees and make childcare more affordable.
I think the point I was trying to make there, though, that just because you may be a lawyer or whatever in terms of status doesn't necessarily mean that...
That's correct. It's entirely based on the provincial income tax.
And then can you tell me, please, were we not to provide the support to families for childcare in the city, what then would be the economic impact to the city overall?
If we cannot provide access to childcare through fee subsidies, we have a number of families who would be unable to work or go to school and contribute to the economy. In addition, those childcare centers would have vacant spaces that they could not fill, and that would impact their financial viability.
And certainly recognize the province also has financial pressures and so on, and so do we as a city. You have a mechanism now which you're working together in order to address the needs of childcare requirement for the City of Toronto.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to just acknowledge Rose Thorne Junior Public School, Grade 5. The teacher is Mr. Vesio in Ward 2 in Councillor Holliday's ward. Welcome. Councillor Layton.
Somewhat fitting that we have a elementary school class join us for our childcare debate. There are two different expansion plans here. There's the subsidy expansion plan and then the total number of spaces. If I understand correctly from Councillor Cressy's questions, the target for the expansion plan for spaces is that 50% of children in the City of Toronto have access to a licensed childcare space. Over what period of time were we looking at increasing to that number, and was our targeted did we actually have a target to be met in that 2050? Or for that 50%?
Yeah, Madam Speaker, in terms of spaces, the target to increase the number of spaces was set through our growth strategy. That's a 10-year ambitious plan. We have a need for approximately 30,000 more spaces. Those are licensed childcare spaces by 2026 in order to meet the demand.
And where is most of this expansion?
To the Speaker, the expansion is taking place across the city. The expansion, the school board expansion, the school boards select the schools where there's an opportunity for childcare. We layer that on our growth strategy to look at neighborhoods where there is a need, which for the most part every neighborhood has a need. So jointly we make decisions, but I can say that the spaces are spread across the City of Toronto.
So, but in the maps that we've seen, where these spaces, these expansion spaces are typically in the outer suburbs, correct?
There is more because those areas tend to have less childcare, higher areas of inequity.
So it's safe to say that for the most part, that expansion is outside of the core.
That's correct.
The expansion plan for subsidies, what is our target there?
Again, through the growth strategy, we have a 10-year target to ensure that families have access to 40 to 50% of subsidies for every space. So our current target by 2026 would be to add 17,000 new fee subsidies.
So that's to eliminate the wait list, we add 17,000 new subsidies.
Correct.
And the $15 million reduction equates to 760 subsidies?
That's correct.
And if that's to continue for the next 10 years, year over year, that's a 760 family reduction in our target of 17,000.
Councillor, through the Speaker, the reduction of the 15 million, it does equate to 760 spaces. In the following years, if we maintain our base, there would not be a further reduction, but you're correct, that 760,000 would carry forward.
Sorry, the 760 spaces.
It would not be a further reduction next year.
But if the ratio that we're paying, unless we increase the city's component, so if we didn't increase the city's component and accept that this is an outright download onto the city, then you're looking at 7,600 spaces over the course of the 10-year plan that wouldn't be paid for. So essentially, we're paying for 7,600 more spaces than we would have last year had the province not changed their ratio.
Through the cost share, that would be correct. However, the increase in the core funding has offset that impact, so the impact is now 186 spaces.
But we don't know if that core funding will continue into next year.
No, we never have our future allocations.
So if it's a 15 million reduction that we're going to absorb in the tax base over a 10-year period, do you know what the by tax increase that would mean to the Toronto taxpayer?
No, I'm sorry, we haven't calculated
Because if it's 15 million times 10, 150 million, you divide it by 25 million for a 1% increase over that 10%, over that 10-year period of time, you're looking at a several percent increase simply to address this download.
I think that's fair.
So over the course of 10 years, I do the math really quickly in my head, that's a 6% increase on our property taxes as a result of this download.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wong Tam.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. With respect to your earlier answers to Councillor Thompson, you were describing the conversations between our staff at the city and the province as quote-unquote going well. Does that mean that the province is likely to reverse their decision?
Through the Speaker, we are providing advice on a number of items. The province is looking at the legislation, doing a review of the legislation, doing a review of the funding formula. So when I say they're going well, the information is being received, they're being receptive. We have definitely seen a change from the original funding announcement in April to our announcement last Friday. There's definitely been a change. So it seems that the advice that we're giving about how those major changes will impact families is being heard.
So, but ultimately, will we see our targets around space expansion met as well as subsidy expansion met? So to me, that would be going well.
The targets, through our growth strategy, the targets around expansion actually rely on all three levels of government, provincial, federal, municipal, to contribute. Through phase one of the growth strategy, we did make significant progress. Given the new spaces that are planned over the next 5 years, that will also help us to make progress in our growth strategy. But we certainly do rely on all levels of government to contribute in order to reach that target.
So the recognition that every order of government has got to come to the table to further this objective, right now, who's failing us? Which order of government is not showing up with the purses and the funding in place?
I would hesitate to say who's failing. The federal government's continuing to contribute. The City of Toronto is making a contribution. The provincial contribution, while it has decreased by $2.8 million this year, the commitment to capital, to building the capital and funding the capital, certainly shows a commitment to growth.
But we're not going to be meeting our targets.
It's a 10-year target. It's a little bit early to say, but they were quite ambitious targets.
I guess given the trajectory that we anticipate and the process that we are undertaking, there's probably a very good chance that we're not going to meet our targets. Would you say?
That's possible.
Okay. And so the city is definitely at the table, and we're participating, and we're giving the funding. The province has changed since the previous announcement under the Liberal government and now under the Doug Ford government. They've said we're not going to fund it the way our predecessor had promised. There's been no changes at the federal level. So really the only government so far that's changed the formula, that's come to the table and says we're actually not going to give you as much, is so far the provincial government. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And with respect to those who are going to be most impacted, we talked about the consequences of not having accessible, affordable childcare. Can you break it down for me into demographic profiles? Who will be most impacted when there is a lack of affordable, accessible childcare? Perhaps by gender, by age?
Madam Speaker, the families receiving fee subsidy and who would be the most impacted are typically low-income families under the provincial income test. Often they are sole support women, so a large proportion of families receiving a fee subsidy are single parent, often women. Often they are marginalized families, so I don't have the numbers, but generally that gives you a snapshot of the families that would be most impacted.
And so by not being able to fully go into the workforce to produce income to sustain a family, this will actually run counter to the poverty reduction strategy of the city, would it not?
That's correct.
So we're going to fall into this vicious cycle for those who actually already not doing well. They'll continue to further not do well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So right now before us, you've got a series of recommendations. I think there's 2 of them. What of those 2 recommendations actually stipulate that the provincial government come back to the table and reinstate the full funding?
One of the recommendations was that City Council call on the province to reverse the funding formula changes to childcare in Ontario and maintain previous provincial funding levels.
Thank you. That was your last question. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
Yes, thank you very much. You were in my office a while back ago to discuss this issue. Is that correct?
Yeah, I know I have spoken with you, yes.
Yeah, you did. You were in my office. So this arrangement under the previous government increased a substantial increase in daycare funding. Is that fair to say?
Madam Speaker, through the Speaker, yes, that's correct.
And how many spaces was that announcement for?
Over the past couple of years, we added more than 30,000?
The provincial government. Now-
30,000 spaces over the past 3 years.
Yeah, and so the provincial government, when they made that announcement, that came at a substantial price tag, didn't it?
Correct.
And what was that price tag?
The investment in childcare between 2017 and 2019 was at excess of $86 million.
Right. And there wasn't a funding, the provincial government they didn't have a funding source for that, did they?
Sorry?
They didn't have a funding source. They were just going to add that on to their deficit.
Yeah, that's what they provided to us. I'm not sure of their funding source.
And so the announcement by the provincial government was by and large to roll back, in essence, the announcement of those new spaces.
It partially rolls back the gains that we made in growth over the past couple of years, yes.
So essentially what the provincial government was doing was because the previous provincial government that made an announcement that they couldn't pay for because the deficit was increasing at such a substantial rate, they rolled it back to show some sort of fiscal discipline.
That's correct. The funding was rolled back.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for the questions. To speak, Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment to be placed on the screen, which is a request on the province around multi-year budgeting. But just so we're all on the same page, the item in front of us today from committee is for all of us, each member of council, to make a decision on whether or not to call on the province to not reduce but reverse the cuts. That's what's in front of us. Let me begin by thanking our staff yet again. This is the 4th time we've had an item like this at council in the last 6 months for their tenacious work. We were emailing back and forth on Saturday morning, and so I want to thank our staff from Children's Services. I want to thank the chair of our committee, Deputy Mayor Thompson, who has emerged as a real child care leader in the city, and the mayor, John Tory, who has been steadfast in his defense of child care. This is Groundhog Day. This is the 4th time we have spoken about provincial cuts to child care in 6 months. The 4th time. And I've said it before, it's getting closer. It's an issue that has become deeply personal for me, as it is for many of you, because my spouse and I are having our first kid in less than 3 weeks. And as I've told you before, when we found out that Grace was pregnant, the very first thing we did, before telling her parents or my best pal Mike here, the very first thing we did was put ourselves on 7 childcare waiting lists. 7. And I'm not sure if we'll get a spot. And we're the lucky ones.
That's when he calls his best friend Mike.
We're the lucky ones because if we get a spot, we can afford to pay for it. We will, between household costs and others, as privileged lucky folks in the city, we will be taking on debt to pay for childcare, but we can afford to do that. And we're lucky. Many are not. And so the discussion we have about childcare for the 4th time in 6 months here should be centered around a simple premise, which is that childcare should be accessible and affordable for everyone who needs it. That's what we're working towards. Childcare, if you need it, you should be able to access it, and you should be able to afford to pay for it. Just like public school or healthcare for that matter, nobody should have to choose whether or not to put their child in childcare due to financial constraints. Nobody. And so here we are in the city of Toronto, where childcare is the most expensive of any city in Canada, and we are debating for the 4th time in 6 months how to stop the province from making it less affordable. We have 30,000 people on subsidies for childcare, but a waiting list of 17,000 people. We should be debating how do we reduce that waiting list. Instead, we're debating how do we protect the subsidies we have from provincial cuts. Only 33% of people, regardless of income, who need spaces for childcare can currently access them. We should be having a debate and a discussion about how we increase the number of kids who can access childcare. Instead, we're discussing how we're going to pay for new provincial cuts to those new spaces. And so in April, the province announced an $85 million cut to childcare. As you recall, a wave of opposition emerged from this chamber and from parents and kids right across the province, and those retroactive cuts were reversed. That was April. In August, the province announced that while they had reversed retroactivity, they were carrying forward with reduced cuts of $15 million. We debated it here in response to yet again a wave of opposition from this chamber and parents and kids. Those cuts have now been reduced but not reversed. And so this really slow ripping off of the childcare cuts Band-Aid is proving to be far too slow and far too painful. The recommendation in front of us today is to call on the province not to reduce the cuts, but to reverse them. And if we truly want to make sure that childcare is in fact affordable and accessible, what we should be discussing with the province is how we increase funding for childcare. Not tax credits, but spaces and subsidies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I support, obviously, the motion that Councillor Cressy has put forward. We've been able to work with him and staff on this. Certainly, Speaker, there are challenges and pressures that are facing all governments at this particular point in time. We started off with 85, we went down to 15, and now we're at 2.8. It sends a message to me, at least, that the work that we're doing here and the work that our amazing staff that are doing is actually basically working. And clearly, maybe it's not working fast enough, and I get that, but I know that the level of expensive, the nature of the expensive nature of childcare in this city certainly didn't start with the Ford government, and probably will not end with that government, because it's the nature of the expense of childcare in the city. Clearly, we want to do more to find mechanism to work in a coordinated, cooperative way to be able to address the challenges and the pressures that are being faced with respect to the cost of childcare in the city. I understand that other governments have pressures, as we do as well. We haven't sort of invented the Quebec model, which is $7 a day and so on. I understand that there are some inherent issues with that as well. But in essence, I think we've come a long way. And going forward, I think that what we certainly hope is to achieve certainly the base level that we were at prior to the changes coming in place. But if we're not able to do that, clearly we at least have a lot of work to do in terms of responding and addressing the issues that are facing us. I note, Speaker, as it relates to the early on programs, I know what I've been doing in my own area now has been putting more Section 37 fundings to make sure that we have more resources available to help in those programming, because we know that there has been an impact on that area as well. And we know the real benefits that is accrued to families and newcomers to the city. It's a service that we need to maintain. Clearly, we know with respect to childcare, it's a service that we have to ensure continues. We've heard about the numbers, whether it's a waiting list of some 17,000 people. That's a lot of people. I know Councillor Cressy pointed out when he found out, he and his partner found out that that his partner was pregnant, and they went ahead and got onto lists. I can tell you, Speaker, in my own case, many years ago, I had a similar situation. The first occasion of knowing that my wife was pregnant, one of the first things that we were told to do was go to put yourself on a list for childcare. And so this isn't something that's new, and I just wanted to make sure that we're all sort of aware that it isn't just simply about finger pointing, it's about how we work together and to bring our concerns certainly to the provincial government to ensure that they understand the challenges and so on, and we can work together. I'm very buoyed by the fact that there is a process that's in place that will allow for this opportunity to take place, not dissimilar to the discussion we had a day ago with the city manager, and he talking about the table where all of the discussions are taking place around transit. So obviously, as a mechanism in place, that particular process is working. This process is working as well with respect to Ms. McNee. We talked a little bit about what's going on, and is she confident that that process is yielding some benefits. So again, we started at 85. There's a 33,000 plus space. We went down to 15, another 760 space. We're now at 2.8, and 186 spaces. So we want to get to that level where we're not losing subsidy and so on, but it's a process that we have to work through. So we have the mechanism. Let's ensure that we support the staff and encourage a positive result, Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Layton?
Listen, I don't know about you, and many of you clearly are on a different side of this than me. I am so, I'm actually getting sick of hearing excuses for why the province is doing this to us. There was an expansion plan for the number of spaces and the number of subsidies in order for us to eliminate the wait list of 17,000 families, and in order for us to serve only half, 50%, of kids in our city with licensed childcare. We had a plan. We had worked in conjunction with our provincial partners. And then this government came in and changed that plan. And how did they change it? Well, they decided to hold us hostage over some space expansion when they knew we couldn't reply. This was earlier in the summer. And then we had to fight to get them to back off. And now they're changing the formula that we have to pay that's downloading the cost onto us. We don't know if the continued, this stopgap measure, this Band-Aid measure, is going to last past this year. And you heard from staff, if we are going to continue along to eliminate this wait list, which I hope we will do, it's going to cost us $150 million. A 6% increase over 10 years just for this childcare file. So I don't want to hear that old times are tough at the province. When they had an agreement with us, we started to execute it, and then they changed the rules yet again. And you know what? We pass motion after motion. Council stands up, our mayor stands up, bravely saying the province shouldn't be doing this, but then his deputy mayor, the deputy mayor Min Wong, just got up and just about patted the province on the back for trying to balance their books based on downloading the cost of childcare onto the city. Patted him on the back. So when we're trying to make a statement of a city, organizing press conferences, I know the mayor went out to childcare centers, we've been out to childcare centers, Councillor Thompson, Chair Thompson's been out to childcare centers, trying to work to shape the public narrative that this isn't something that should be downloaded onto the city, or worse yet, that we're forced to choose between one thing and actually funding childcare for our kids, which is a decision we're going to have to make when that budget rolls around and it's not balancing itself out. But then Deputy Mayor Min Wong goes out and shifts that narrative to, well, they had to do it. They had no other choice. We're working at cross purposes here. We have one deputy mayor saying we got to fight for our kids, and another deputy mayor saying, well, let the province cut whatever they want. Choose a side. Choose a side and work together. Because we had an agreement with the province, they changed the rules. So let's fight to get them to uphold those rules, not let them off the hook like Deputy Mayor Min Wong just did.
Thank you. Okay, if we can put the motion on the screen. Oh, okay. Sorry, Mayor Tory to speak? Sorry, Mayor
Speaker,
Tory.
just in light of the fact that Councillor Layton's most recent comments drew a distinction between the roles of two deputy mayors, may I just say I think we've made great progress on this, and I think that was sort of acknowledged by everybody, and even on the weekend in some of the comments that were made, you know, I saw Councillor Cressy speaking through you, Madam Speaker, on television, sort of saying, well, we shouldn't be talking about whether we accept any reductions, and that's in fact what I've tried to say. But I just think in really response to Councillor Layton's remarks just now through you, Madam Speaker, my sense is we're fighting when we have to fight, and certainly I've tried to sort of calibrate that, and I think that's the secret of trying to make progress with this government, or with any government, but I think with this one in particular. And I think the things are heading in the right direction. I think we sometimes forget that the point on which we can all be absolutely united, I believe, is regardless of what their financial problems are, and regardless of the fact, because I agree with you, we did have an agreement, it was a plan that was kind of stretching out over a number of years to address the problem. The question really is that I think we can all fight hard on together is that no government federally, no government provincially, should be trying to download responsibility for social programs onto the property tax base, because it can't sustain it. We've always known that. Everybody knows that. They know that. It was not intended that should ever be the case. And so I think that is the real ground on which we have to put forward our case here and advocate, which is that regardless of what government is there and regardless of what their financial problems are, that they're quick to remind us of what their constitutional authorities are when it suits them to exercise those. And I mean any provincial government. We found that out with the road tolls, for example, where we were trying to do something that was right, is still right, would have still been the right thing to do, would be on the verge of being implemented by now, and they, when they chose to do so, exercised their power to say no. But when it comes time for them to exercise their power, and I just mean the provincial government, not any particular one, to say yes to their responsibilities under the very same constitution for these kinds of social programs, they end up doing things that in effect say, if you want it, you pay for it yourselves. I mean, you meaning property taxpayers. That's the real fighting ground here. And let's make sure as a city council that we don't get sucked into dividing ourselves at a time when I think that the fact we've remained united on transit, on the cutbacks in the budget, have helped us to achieve progress on reversing some of that, and it is a work in progress to address Councillor Leahy. Councillor Cressy's dead right. I mean, getting down to 2 million is not a victory yet, because in fact the number should be plus a certain number of million, not -2, only -2 compared to only -85. And so let's just remember that, and I'm going to continue to work, because I don't like the expression often, I think we spend too much time picking sides, but if I had to pick sides between the kids and, and the government and its financial problems, I'll pick the kids 10 times out of 10, because they're who we're here to represent, and those families. But I think we have to go about trying to resolve this issue in a way that has worked so far. And believe you me, I think you know, and I think they now know, that if I, as the mayor and working with the council, have to stand up and fight, we'll do that. But I think in the meantime, advocacy, and especially advocacy on whose responsibility these things are principally, is the best way for us to go, and I will continue to do that. And I'll do it with the support of all the deputy mayors and all the members of council, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can put the motion on the screen. Okay, motion on the screen by Councillor Cressy. Recorded vote.
Councillor Karagianis, please.
Councillor Wong Tam, please.
The motion carries unanimously, 22 in favor.
Okay. Okay, item as amended, recorded vote.
Councillor Crawford, please. Councillor Wong Tam, please.
The item is amended, carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
Okay, thank you. So why do I have names on the screen? What's that for? Counselor Karygiannis, what? I can't wipe it out. You have to wipe it out. Okay. All right. Oh, Counselor Baila?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would just like to acknowledge and welcome City Councillor from Portugal, from the city of Nazaré, Ms. Regina Piedade Matos. She's here visiting us, so welcome to Toronto. She just arrived yesterday. So Nazaré, if you're into surfing, you really know about the waves of Nazaré. McNamara surfed there a wave of 23 meters, one of the biggest ones. And Ms. Piedade Matos is here visiting the community and participating in some events. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Not now. Okay, so we can go to the quick release that we were doing earlier, EX 9.4. Councillor Pasternak, your amendment?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The challenge with this project on the list is that the vision by the federal government is that it be on federal lands, and it's creating some complexities.
So we're doing a quick item.
Right, so I'm just asking for a working group to discuss the project, should it be funded.
Okay. And then if you can put my amendment on the screen. Okay. So on Councillor Pasternak's amendment, on favor, carried. The amendment on favor, carried. Item is amended, recorded vote.
Councillor Layton, when you're seated, please. Councillor Bradford. Councillor Matlow.
Now, were there members of council that indicated they wanted to go on camera but the audit? Nobody? Oh, Councillor Pillion? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of prepare ourselves.
The item is amended, carries unanimously, 22 in favor.
Okay, so Councillor Billion wants to go in camera. Do we have the motion? Okay, is on which item, Councillor Billion? All of them? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Item 1 for in camera. Well, I'm fine with 2, and maybe we should. Sure, let's make it 1, 2, 3 in case.
All right, so we'll prepare the motion. Okay, Councillor Billion, can you read the motion?
I can if I have it to read.
I understand that you have the motion.
It's right in front of you on.
It's right there.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That council resets its public session to meet as committee of the whole and closed session to consider audit 4.1. Do I need to read the whole thing out?
Yep.
Cybersecurity, a robust cybersecurity program needed to mitigate current and emerging threats. Reason for confidential information, the safety and security of property belonging to the city or one of its agencies and corporations. Audit 4.2, investigation into allegations of reprisal not found, but lessons learned, reason for confidential information, security of property belonging to the City of Toronto, personal matters about an identifiable person, and litigation or potential litigation that affects the City of Toronto. Audit 4.3, Auditor General's 2019 status report on outstanding audit recommendations for city divisions and corporate services and finance and treasury services. Reason for confidential information, the security of the property of the municipality or local board, labor relations or employee negotiations, and litigation or potential litigation that affects the City of Toronto.
All in favor? Carried. So if I can ask the members in the council chambers from the public or all staff that are not on this item to please vacate the council chambers, including the media. Okay, thank you. City Council has completed its closed session consideration of items AU 4.1, AU 4.2, and AU 4.3. No motions were made in closed session. We will now proceed to the public. So, Councillor Holliday, we only have a few minutes. Councillor Holliday?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will be very brief. Of course, I will thank Madam Auditor and her team for their hard work on this, and city staff that have also done great work. I do have a motion to place, and that's the City Council requests the City Manager in consultation with the Auditor General to report to the December 17 and 18, 2019 meeting of City Council on mechanisms required that would enable the Auditor General to conduct risk assessments or investigate cybersecurity for agencies and corporations not currently within the Auditor General's purview. And I would hope that this sends a very strong signal to everybody that's observing, and including the amount of time that we spent in camera, that City Council takes this matter extremely seriously.
Okay.
And I just look forward to continued work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fillion?
Yes, quickly also, I want to thank the Auditor General, another series of outstanding, although highly troubling reports. I do think we're turning the corner here. I mean, what all of these reports point to is a fairly severe lack of accountability in the system. I do think we are starting to put in place a much better system for accountability. Both, we have an extremely diligent Auditor General. I think the City Manager is, highly motivated to insert more accountability in the system. And the Audit Committee really is doing excellent work under Stephen Holliday's leadership. So I think the public can feel reassured, even though these examples, when they hit the paper, are highly embarrassing and makes it look like we're wasting money very freely here. What in fact we are doing is we are catching all those and correcting them. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Perruzza, quickly, because we have to.
Speaker, as quick as I can get to it. I'm not going to move a motion here, but I believe that as I turn my mind to technology and the size of technology, and not just cybersecurity, the constantly evolving and changing technology and new equipment and software, and the amounts of monies that are expended in this area, I believe that there has to be a political division or accountability section. I don't know whether that takes the form of a subcommittee or a full standing committee of council that meets on a regular basis, but that also in some ways holds the division accountable, but also provides the resources that are required to be able to achieve some of the goals and objectives that we're all striving for. It's not just simply enough to punt the football to staff and then look to the Auditor General every 2 or 3 or 4 years and say, have they done a good job or have they done a bad job? That's not the way that this should work, and it's never going to work that way, quite frankly. So this is far too important an area of governance and far too big in terms of money, and far too fast in terms of changes and constant changes, licenses and equipment, and finding that one division's got some license, not achieving efficiencies in terms of how you spend money on technology, and all of those things, just simply because we don't have the time to focus in on it in the way that we should. I want to thank the auditor for the report, and want to thank her for having caused us, a moment of reflection in an area that's far too important for us to just simply punt it off to someone else to do. We need to get involved in this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Motion by Councillor Holliday. On favor? Carried. Item is amended. On favor? Carried. So we complete AU 4.1. Councillor Holliday, would you like to release 2 and 3?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Happy to release those items.
Okay. On AU 4.2, all in favor? Carried. AU 4.3, pardon? On 3? Okay, recorded vote on 3.
Counselor Perruzza, please. And Mayor Tory, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 20 in favor.
Thank you. Recess to 2 o'clock.